There are moments that divide your life into before and after. Mine happened on a Tuesday afternoon in October, when I found myself sitting in my car outside my apartment, unable to move. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white, but I couldn't make myself open the door. Inside that apartment was my partner of 7 years, and the conversation we were about to have would shatter everything I thought I knew about us, about myself, about the careful life I'd constructed. I sat there for 43 minutes, watching the shadows grow longer across the parking lot. I used to believe that love was enough. That if you just loved someone hard enough, deeply enough, completely enough, everything else would fall into place. My parents' bitter divorce when I was 12 had only strengthened this resolve. I would never let my relationships disintegrate the way theirs had. I would be better, more attentive, more understanding, more forgiving. When I met my partner in graduate school, it felt like the universe confirming my belief. We were in the same psychology program, both passionate about helping people heal from trauma. Our connection was immediate and intense, the kind people write songs about. We could talk for hours about everything and nothing, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at inside jokes no one else understood. Within 6 months, we had moved in together. By year 2, we had mapped out our future. Finish our degrees, establish our careers, buy a house in the suburbs, start a family. The plan was perfect. We were perfect. At least, that's what I told myself, even as the first hairline fractures began to form. The problems started so subtly I barely noticed them. Small disagreements that were never fully resolved. Brief moments of disconnect that I brushed aside. The way my stomach would tighten when my partner would make certain offhand comments about my ambitions, my friends, my family, always wrapped in a layer of concern that made it impossible to object, without seeming defensive or ungrateful. "I'm just looking out for you," my partner would say, with that soft, worried expression that made me feel simultaneously loved and diminished. "I know you better than you know yourself sometimes." And maybe that was true. Maybe I did need the guidance, the gentle corrections, the reminders about my flaws and weaknesses. After all, my partner was the one with the emotional intelligence, the one everyone came to for advice, the one who could read people like books. I was lucky to have someone so insightful, so caring. So I learned to doubt myself, to second-guess my perceptions, my feelings, my memories. When something felt wrong, I assumed the problem was with me, my oversensitivity, my unreasonable expectations, my unresolved childhood issues. I worked harder to be better, to be worthy of this love that had become the center of my identity. We bought our house 3 years ago, a charming colonial with a wraparound porch in a quiet neighborhood. I remember standing in the empty living room after closing, my partner's arms wrapped around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. "This is where our kids will take their first steps," my partner whispered, and I felt my heart swell with a joy so pure it brought tears to my eyes. This was what I had always wanted, a real home, a true family, the stability I had craved since watching my parents' marriage collapse in slow motion. I threw myself into making that house a home. I painted walls, planted gardens, picked out furniture. I hosted dinner parties for our friends and colleagues, always careful to present us as the ideal couple they all believed us to be. The cracks in our relationship were our secret, hidden behind closed doors and warm smiles. My friends started to drift away, one by one. I told myself it was natural. People get busy with their own lives. But deep down, I knew it was because I had become someone they didn't recognize anymore. Someone who always canceled plans at the last minute because my partner wasn't feeling well or had a bad day at work. Someone who carefully monitored what I said about my relationship, keeping the narrative polished and positive. Someone who laughed a little too loudly at my partner's jokes and agreed a little too quickly with my partner's opinions. My best friend was the last to go. We had been inseparable since undergraduate school, but over time, our weekly coffee dates became monthly, then quarterly, then sporadic texts that eventually faded into silence. The last time we met, almost 2 years ago now, my friend looked at me with such sadness as we sat across from each other at our favorite cafe. "You know you can always call me, right? No matter what." "No judgment," my friend said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I know," I replied, forcing a bright smile. "But everything's great, really. Work is challenging but good. The house is coming along beautifully. We're thinking about starting a family soon." My friend just nodded, unconvinced. "Just remember who you are. That's all I ask." I didn't understand what that meant at the time. Or maybe I did, but wasn't ready to face it. Instead, I went home and told my partner about the strange comment, seeking reassurance that I was still myself, still the person I had always been. "Your friend has always been jealous of what we have," my partner said, stroking my hair. "Some people just can't handle seeing others build something real and lasting." I nodded, letting the explanation sink in and soothe my unease. But that night, lying awake beside my sleeping partner, I found myself wondering, who was I, really? And when had I last felt like myself? The promotion came unexpectedly. My supervisor called me into her office on a Friday afternoon, telling me she was impressed with my work with trauma patients and wanted me to head up a new program the clinic was launching. It would mean more responsibility, more hours initially, but also more autonomy and a significant salary increase. I floated out of her office, my mind racing with possibilities. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I had been working toward for years. I couldn't wait to share the news with my partner. The reaction I received wasn't what I expected. "You're already stretched so thin," my partner said with a frown, setting down a plate of pasta at the dinner table. "And we were talking about starting a family soon. This seems like the worst possible timing." "But it's such an amazing opportunity," I countered, my enthusiasm deflating slightly. "And the program development phase is just 6 months. After that, the hours would actually be more flexible than what I have now." My partner sighed, that familiar sound of patient disappointment. "You know how you get when you're stressed about work. You stop taking care of yourself. You get those migraines. Remember last year when you ended up in the ER? The memory made me wince. I had been working on a difficult case, pushing myself too hard. My partner had been the one to drive me to the hospital at 2 a.m., to sit with me as they administered pain medication, to take care of me for the days that followed. "I'm better at managing my stress now," I said, but my voice had lost its conviction. "I just worry about you," my partner replied, reaching across the table to take my hand. "And I worry about us. About the plans we made together. Does this promotion mean those plans don't matter anymore?" The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Of course our plans mattered. Of course I didn't want to jeopardize our future, our family. My partner was right to be concerned. I did tend to get consumed by work. Maybe this wasn't the right time. Maybe it was selfish of me to even consider it. "You're right," I said finally. "Duh. I'll talk to my supervisor on Monday, see if there's someone else who could take the position." The relief on my partner's face was immediate and profound. That's my practical one. Always making the smart choice in the end. I called my supervisor that weekend and declined the promotion. She was surprised and clearly disappointed, but accepted my decision professionally. When I hung up the phone, I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. I told myself it was the right choice for us, for our future. But for the first time, I couldn't quite silence the small voice inside me asking, "What about my future? What about what I want?" That question began to surface more and more in the months that followed. When my partner decided we should postpone trying for a baby because the market was unstable. When my partner vetoed a weekend trip I had planned with a former colleague because the timing wasn't convenient. When my partner explained, always patiently, always reasonably, why my ideas, my desires, my needs were impractical, unrealistic, or ultimately not in our best interest, I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake for hours, listening to my partner's steady breathing beside me, feeling both comforted by the familiar presence and somehow desperately alone. During the day, I went through the motions, working with my patients, maintaining our home, smiling at the right moments, but I felt increasingly disconnected, as if I were watching my life through a pane of glass. The migraines returned, worse than before. Panic attacks ambushed me in quiet moments, in the shower, while driving to work, as I stood in the grocery store trying to remember what I needed to buy. I began seeing my own therapist, though I told my partner it was just to help with work-related stress. Dr. Kim was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a direct manner that somehow made it possible for me to speak truths I had been hiding even from myself. In her small plant-filled office, I slowly began to unravel the tangled threads of my relationship. "When was the last time you made a significant decision on your own?" she asked during one session, about 3 months in. I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again. I couldn't remember. Every choice, from what car to buy to which movie to watch on a Friday night, was filtered through my partner's preferences, my partner's opinions, my partner's needs. I started, then had to clear my throat against the sudden tightness. "I think I've been disappearing, piece by piece, for a long time now." Dr. Kim nodded, her expression compassionate but not pitying. And how do you feel about that? The question was simple, but it broke something open inside me. How did I feel? When had anyone, including myself, last cared about how I felt? I'm angry, I whispered, surprised by the word even as it left my mouth. I'm so angry I can hardly breathe sometimes. Once named, the anger became impossible to ignore. It rose in me at unexpected moments, when my partner casually dismissed my suggestion for our anniversary dinner, when my partner helpfully reorganized my home office without asking, when my partner reminded me yet again about that one patient who had filed a complaint 3 years ago, as if it defined my entire professional capability. But the anger was tangled up with fear, bone-deep, paralyzing fear. Who would I be without this relationship? How would I survive the loss of this dream I had invested everything in? What if I was wrong, and the problem really was me? My unreasonable expectations, my inability to be satisfied with what everyone else could see, was a wonderful life. The journal was an accident. I wasn't snooping, wasn't looking for evidence or confirmation. I was cleaning out the guest room closet, preparing for my partner's parents' annual visit, when I found it tucked behind a stack of old photo albums. A simple black notebook, unmarked. I almost put it back without opening it. Some last instinct of self-preservation, perhaps. But something made me pause, made me flip open the cover. And there, in my partner's familiar handwriting, was my name. Page after page about me. About us. It wasn't a love journal. It wasn't filled with reflections on our happiest moments or plans for our future. Instead, it was a meticulous record of my perceived failures, my weaknesses, my flaws. Arguments we'd had, with my words twisted and reframed to make me seem irrational, demanding, mentally unstable. Notes about my family history, my childhood traumas, vulnerabilities I had shared in moments of trust, all annotated with observations about how these could be managed or used when necessary. There were strategies outlined for keeping me dependent, isolated, second-guessing myself. Ways to ensure I remained grateful, compliant, convinced of my own luck in having found someone willing to tolerate my damaged self. 7 years of psychological manipulation, laid out in black and white. I sat on the guest room floor for hours, reading and rereading, feeling reality shift around me. This couldn't be real. This level of calculation, of deliberate cruelty. It had to be some sort of joke, or a creative writing exercise, or something other than what it appeared to be. But deep down I knew. The truth had been whispering to me for years, and I had refused to listen. Now it was screaming, impossible to ignore. I carefully returned the journal to its hiding place and finished cleaning the closet. I made dinner as usual. I smiled and discussed the weather and tomorrow's schedule as if my entire world hadn't just imploded. When my partner touched me that night, I didn't flinch away. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed time to think, to plan. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. As soon as my partner left for the day, I began to move through our house, as if seeing it for the first time. I opened drawers, checked files, looked behind books on shelves. I found 2 more journals, along with a folder of printed emails, between my partner and someone I didn't know. Emails discussing me as if I were a long-term project, rather than a person. I took photographs of selected pages, then returned everything exactly as I had found it. I made an appointment with Dr. Kim for the following day, and I began to prepare myself for the hardest conversation of my life. That brings me back to Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my car, gathering the courage to walk into my own home. I had rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm and clear. I would not accuse, would not explode with the rage that had been building inside me since making my discovery. I would simply state what I had found, what I knew, and what I needed to happen next. But all my careful preparation dissolved the moment I saw my partner's face, that beloved face I had trusted completely, had built my life around. My voice failed me. My carefully constructed sentences evaporated. Instead, I placed my phone on the coffee table between us, screen unlocked, the photographs of the journal pages displayed. For one endless moment, there was only silence. I watched the expressions cross my partner's face, confusion, recognition, calculation, and finally, a strange sort of relief. "I've been waiting for this day," my partner said quietly. Part of me hoped it would never come, but another part knew it had to, eventually. Why? Why? The word escaped me, raw and broken. Why would you do this? Why me? My partner looked at me then with an expression I had never seen before. No mask of concern, or love, or patience, just cold assessment. Because you were perfect. So eager to be loved that you'd accept almost anything as proof of it. So desperate to build the family you never had that you'd sacrifice everything else. So convinced of your own brokenness that you'd never believe you deserved better. Each word hit like a physical blow. The worst part was that I couldn't deny any of it. Every syllable resonated with the truth I had been hiding from. "I'm leaving," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Today, now." My partner nodded, as if this too had been anticipated, planned for. "You'll be back. You've invested too much to walk away. And where would you even go? Who would want you, with all your issues, all your baggage? An hour earlier those words might have worked. Might have made me question myself, retreat back into the false safety of our relationship. But something had shifted irrevocably inside me. The spell was broken. "I don't need anyone to want me," I said, standing straighter. "I want myself back. That's enough for now." I had already packed a small bag while my partner was at work. Just essentials, clothes, toiletries, important documents. I had booked a hotel room for the next week. I had withdrawn enough cash to get by until I could sort out my finances. Small steps, but decisive ones. As I turned to leave, my partner called after me, voice suddenly vulnerable, almost frightened. "You can't just throw away 7 years. You can't just pretend none of it was real." I paused at the door, not looking back. That's the thing. It wasn't real. But I am. And I'm done pretending. The first night in the hotel room was the hardest. I sat on the edge of the generic queen bed, staring at the bland watercolor print on the wall, feeling untethered from reality. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my partner, alternating between desperate apologies, vicious accusations, and manipulative reminders of all we had built together, all we would lose. I turned off my phone and ran a bath in the too small tub. As I sank into the hot water, I began to sob. Deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from the very core of my being. I cried for the years I had lost, for the person I had allowed myself to become, for the dreams that had turned out to be elaborate illusions. But beneath the grief was something unexpected. A tiny flicker of relief, of freedom. For the first time in years, I didn't have to monitor my expressions, guard my words, anticipate another person's reactions. I could simply be, in all my messy, broken authenticity. The next morning, I checked into an extended stay hotel with a small kitchenette and called Dr. Kim. She helped me find a trauma-informed attorney who specialized in cases involving psychological abuse. I filed a restraining order based on the evidence I had gathered and the escalating nature of my partner's messages. I opened a new bank account. I called my supervisor and took a leave of absence from work. Each step was terrifying. Each decision made me question myself, made me wonder if I was overreacting, if I was the crazy one my partner had so often subtly suggested I might be. But I kept moving forward, one small choice at a time. 3 weeks after leaving, I returned to the house with a police escort to collect more of my belongings. My partner wasn't there, had apparently moved in with a friend temporarily. Walking through those familiar rooms felt surreal, like visiting a movie set of a life I had once lived. I took only what was undeniably mine: clothes, books, a few photos, my grandmother's serving dish. As I was leaving, I found myself standing in the bedroom, looking at the space we had shared for so long. The bed where I had lain awake countless nights, doubting myself, swallowing my needs. The closet where I had hidden evidence of small rebellions, a book my partner wouldn't approve of, a friendship maintained in secret. The mirror where I had practiced my smiles until they looked convincing enough to fool everyone, including myself. I don't know how long I stood there, but when I finally turned to leave, I felt something shift inside me. Not healing, not yet, but the first recognition that healing might someday be possible. The months that followed blurred together in my memory. I found a small apartment in a different part of town. I returned to work part-time, focusing on administrative tasks while I dealt with the legal and financial complexities of untangling my life from my partner's. I started a more intensive therapy program, specifically designed for survivors of psychological abuse. The hardest part wasn't the practical challenges, though those were substantial. It was confronting the reality of what had happened to me, what I had allowed to happen. In therapy, I began to understand the concept of coercive control, to recognize the subtle ways my partner had isolated me, undermined my confidence, rewritten my own experiences and memories until I no longer trusted myself. I learned that what had happened to me had a name, had recognizable patterns, was not unique or special or somehow deserved. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't fundamentally flawed in some way that justified the treatment I had received. This knowledge was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it forced me to acknowledge the full scope of the deception, the years I had lost, the damage done to my sense of self. Liberating because it meant I wasn't alone, wasn't beyond help, wasn't doomed to repeat this pattern forever. 6 months after leaving, I received an unexpected email from my former best friend. They had heard through mutual acquaintances about my separation and wanted to check in. The message was careful, non-judgmental, leaving plenty of space for me to ignore it if I wasn't ready for contact. I stared at the email for a long time before replying. I was ashamed of how I had let this friendship fade, embarrassed by how completely I had bought into my partner's narrative about my friend's jealousy and negativity. But beneath those feelings was a profound longing for connection, for someone who had known me before, someone who might help me remember who I had been. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. The moment I saw my friend walk through the door, something cracked open inside me, a flood of memories from a time when I had been stronger, more certain, more authentically myself. "You look good, my friend," said after we had hugged, both of us a little teary. Different, more like you. And somehow, despite everything that was true, I was different. Scarred, certainly. Still healing, still struggling with doubts and fears and moments of overwhelming grief for what I had lost, but also more authentically myself than I had been in years. "I'm getting there," I replied, and for the first time in a very long time, I believed it might actually be true. A year has passed since that Tuesday afternoon in my car. A year of therapy, of legal battles, of grieving and raging and slowly, painfully rebuilding. A year of rediscovering myself, piece by piece, like assembling a complex puzzle without the benefit of the picture on the box. There are still bad days. Days when I wake up disoriented, reaching for a presence that's no longer there. Days when I doubt every decision, second-guess every instinct, fall back into patterns of thinking that my partner spent years carefully cultivating in me. Days when I miss the certainty of that relationship, toxic as it was, the clear role I had to play, the script I had memorized so perfectly. But there are good days too, and they're becoming more frequent. Days when I make a small decision without anxiety or hesitation, what to eat for breakfast, what movie to watch, which route to take to work. Days when I recognize an old interest resurfacing, my love of photography, of hiking, of ridiculous science fiction novels that my partner always dismissed as childish. Days when I catch myself laughing without self-consciousness, or expressing an opinion without first calculating its potential consequences. I've reconnected with my family, rebuilding those relationships one awkward conversation at a time. I've made new friends through a support group for survivors of psychological abuse. I've even started dating again, very cautiously. Coffee meetings in public places, clear boundaries, a new awareness of red flags I might once have mistaken for romantic intensity or concern. The house was sold 6 months ago. Splitting the proceeds was complicated and contentious, but eventually resolved. I last saw my partner at the final signing, thinner, somehow diminished without the power our relationship had provided. We didn't speak beyond what was legally necessary. There was nothing left to say. Sometimes I wonder if my partner has found someone new, someone else who fits the profile, someone eager to be loved, desperate for family, convinced of their own unworthiness. I hope not, but I know it's likely. Patterns like these don't change without radical intervention, without the kind of deep self-examination my partner always skillfully avoided. But that's not my concern anymore. My responsibility now is to myself, to my healing, to building a life that feels authentic and sustainable. Some days that feels impossibly daunting. Other days it feels like the greatest adventure I've ever undertaken. Today, as I sit in my small but sunny apartment, surrounded by books I chose myself and furniture arranged the way I like it, I'm struck by how ordinary my life looks from the outside. I go to work. I come home. I cook simple meals and watch shows that interest me. I call my friends. I water my plants. There's nothing dramatic or exceptional about any of it. And yet, every mundane choice represents a tiny victory, a reclamation of autonomy, a step away from the person who sat frozen in that car a year ago, terrified of the conversation ahead. I'm not fully healed. I'm not sure I ever will be, completely. The experience has changed me in ways I'm still discovering, has left scars both visible and hidden. But I'm learning to work with those changes rather than against them, to incorporate them into a new understanding of who I am and what I want from my life. Last week, I was offered another promotion at work, similar to the one I declined 3 years ago. This time, I accepted. This time, the only person I needed to consult was myself. This time, I trusted my own judgment, my own assessment of what I could handle, what I deserved. What I deserve. It's a small thing, perhaps. But as I signed the paperwork, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful, it nearly overwhelmed me. Not just pride or excitement, but a profound sense of coming home to myself after a very long absence. I don't know what the future holds. I'm learning to be okay with that uncertainty, to trust that I can handle whatever comes next. I'm building a life based not on someone else's vision or validation, but on my own values, my own desires, my own understanding of what makes a life worth living. It's not the life I thought I would have. It's not the dream I held onto for so long. But it's real, and it's mine, and for now, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.